I just wanted to start by introducing myself. My name is Nils Persson. I'm stationed in Stockholm. I've been with PDS for the last 10 years, working in different technical roles. And today I'm part of our customer success team, working with pre-sales together with Roger as one of them. So the topic for today's session is focused on data quality in both Creo and Windchill, and a couple of tools that can help us in keeping that information accurate and according to our company standards. But first, let's focus a little bit about the problems of bad data. So all organizations suffer from some level of bad data systems. What that bad data is could be different for each organization, but our experience is that it's often caused by inconsistency from the company's standards, often caused by incorrect use from how the system is intended to work and being configured for the site. Example of this in Windchill could be the following points. Could be a mismatch between CAD structure and part structure. It could be an inconsistency in company number and naming conventions. It could be that the released part structures, all of the sub-levels in that structure are qualified for release, or that objects are missing required attributes. It could also be that documents are not linked correctly to articles in the system. The system is, of course, never bulletproof to work according to the company's standards, so the data needs to be actively maintained in the system to stay accurate. We all like to cut corners sometimes to get to the next step further, but this can end up being more time-consuming and quite costly in the end. A simple example of what problems bad data can cause is with searchability in the system. If the quality of the metadata is bad, if naming conventions are off, users can have a hard time finding the information that they need and problems in retrieving and compiling correct information. This also leads to time-consuming actions to find and correct that information. When it comes to CAD, this can be how the model is designed according to modeling best practices. It could cause that it's being hard to reuse, filled with unnecessary reference, or tough on performance for your client computers. Another example of how bad data can affect the enterprise, and quite badly, is when unreleased or faulty data gets exported to other downstream systems, like, for example, ERP. Departments consuming this data, like the supply chain, could in worst case receive costly back orders, or if the parts are manufactured internally, perhaps errors in production. But if we just stay within the design department, this is still a very time-consuming, frustrating for the users, and quite costly in the end. So to help improve on the quality and help guide the users that create and maintain data to keep the company standards, there are two tools that I would like to show you today that could aid in this process. And the first one is Creo ModelCheck, which is an integrated application that runs transparently within Creo Parametric. It uses a configurable list of company design standards and best modeling practices. It can be configured to run interactively as well as automatically when you regenerate or save a model. You can use this for Creo if you're working with it standalone, or it could be connected to Windchill. And ModelCheck is really an old-timer that has been around for ages, but has gotten a facelift quite recently and a couple of new checks with each release of Creo. So if you're on an older Creo Parametric release, you're going to see some improvements also in the look and feel and the usability of this tool. What is pretty central with ModelCheck are the different types of modes where it can be run. So as we can see in this picture, we are overlooking a check file, which is called simple checks. And on each row within this check file, we see each individual check. On each column, we see these different types of modes, and these are 5 of them. It's interact, which we can run manually from Creo at any time from the menus. It is batch, that can search into a directory on your hard drive and check a set of models. This is particularly interesting if you're not using Windchill perhaps, or if you're exporting files from Creo to send externally. There are also regen and save, which either runs when you regenerate or save the model. And there is at the end metrics, which is, it's more of a report. It's going to summarize the validation, how many models have this issue. So it's great to get some statistics of how your data quality is. So the idea is that you can set up your check file with a set of different checks, and you can choose either to include them, that they should run, yes, or they should run with an error warning or actually just a warning message. And you can do this for each individual mode, basically. So some of these you want to include perhaps every time you save the model. Others you might want to run interactively when you decide to run them. So that's a central part in how ModelCheck is set up and works. So what could it be used for in the end? It could look for circular references, perhaps buried features, suppressed features. It could check if drawings are according to your company standards. You probably have set up some DTL file, it's called in Creo Parametric, that holds all of what should a drawing look like, basically. And this could validate if your current drawing is according to that configuration that you have set up. There could be to include standard datum features and parameters. Perhaps you update your standard or your start parts that will create these datum features and parameters, and the older models do not hold this information. This could be automatically injected with ModelCheck. So it validates if it looks according to spec, to what you've set up, and if it does not, it could include these values or these features automatically. It can also spell check drawings, for instance, and it could also add, in many times customers set up relations to their models. They might not be included in older versions. This is something that also could be injected with a save, for instance, or during the action of these. So with this said, I wanted to leave the slides for a while, and let's jump into Creo here and look at some of these models as we run ModelCheck on them. Let's start with a drawing model here. So I got my, it's a ski for a snowmobile. And at this point, let's just start with these configuration files. So if you go to your options and your environment and a ModelCheck settings, this is where you are going to find the configuration for ModelCheck. And this is where you can set this up. And this is one of the things that they included in one of the later versions of Creo Parametric, to actually have a better UI, that this is more integrated into Creo Parametric. Before, this was handled in separate files outside of the software, but now you can do it directly within the software itself. And it's based on a set of files. The starting one is config init, which will hold all of the configuration for ModelCheck. More of a config pro, you could say, for ModelCheck. If it should be enabled, what type of directories we are in, how the reporting should look like, where it should be exported, things like that. The more overall and general settings are held within this file. And this is where you would start out if you want to enable this, because ModelCheck is included in Creo parametrics. So this comes with any license of Creo, basically. In the init file, there is also a possibility to, in these different modes, generate parameters in the model that will keep information about the ModelCheck runs that we perform. So it could save with the model how many errors we had, at what time was ModelCheck run, what type of run did we perform, what checks were included, and so on. So this is the overall configuration file for this. If we go into conditional settings, there is going to be a file that holds what type of check files we want to run. So there is a default level to this. So this will run at all time if we activate it, and we can specify that check file that we want to have here. So this could be checks that we want to check for all models, basically. Apart from that, you can include one or many more check files, and you could define them depending on, in this case, model type, for instance. If this is an NC file or a sheet metal file, there are certain checks that we want to check with this. So I could specify that I want to run my PDS sheet metal check file with, if the part is a sheet metal, it should run this check file instead. So it's gonna run the default and then also the sheet metal one. And the thing with NC, I could set up a third that is checking certain things when it comes to those types of models. So you can define these different types of conditions. So you have check files for specific use cases or specific models that need certain checks to be validated. So we don't run everything for all models. The actual check files are present under configuration. So if I go in here, let's not say that, you can see the ones that are set up specifically here. So if I go into my PDS check file, you will see that there are quite a few different checks in this file, but you see there is a lot of N, meaning no, so they are not run in these specific modes. So you can add in a lot of checks, and you can determine whether or not they should be run in these respective modes, basically. So if I wanted to change one of these, I could just click on it, set yes or no, and in some cases also set the level to this. So if we go down here, these are set up, especially for drawings. We have the set to warning, for instance, instead. So it's going to give a warning message about this as it's run. So that's how you can configure it. You add in the different types of checks that you want to include. In this time, it's quite many, and you set whether or not they should run in these respective modes, basically. Apart from the check file, there are also like start files that you could run to verify, for instance, some of these default things that you want to have in place, whether or not certain datum planes should be the naming convention of these, what type of units you should have, the DTL file that we were discussing in the slides earlier, things like that. So we start off at a good point with a model. As in this case, when let's say I've been in here and I configured a lot of checks, and at this time I also have a model open, I can click at the bottom here, list configs, and it will actually display how would this model react to my configuration that I have set up. So it would display that it would be affected by PDS check, and it would run through the start file and run through the constant file, etc. So it gives an easy overview to if I'm trying to configure something, if it would have had an effect on this model that I currently have open. So that is the configuration part. Let's skip this one and go back to the actual model. So in this case, let's say I've been working on this drawing and I'm ready to send this into Windchill to check it back in. At this point, I perhaps have been performing some saves during the design changes I made, and we have a check file set up with each save, storing and validating information there. But at this point, when I want to check this in, I could run a check manually, one of the interactive checks. So if I go to prepare and to ModelCheck interactive, I can run ModelCheck directly. So since this is a drawing, it's going to ask me if I also want to run this on the underlying assembly, but I'm going to choose to say no on that one. When I run ModelCheck, it will now display in a separate window. Older users of Creo are probably used to that it's in the integrated browser instead, but this is now it's more looking like the standard UI of Windchill. And this separate window is something you can have on another screen, or it's easier to look at the model at the same time as you're working with ModelCheck as well. So I think it's quite nice improvement. And what you will have here is an overview of the model that we run. This is something that could be brought into reports and such. So the model, the date, what type of mode was this, what type of configs or check files were run. I have a really strange name on this client, but it's called POS. So that's the Windows user currently. When was this last saved and what version of Creo was it? So, and apart from that, if I would have run the drawing models, it could have showed some errors for those, but let's focus on the actual drawing in this case. So here we have 3 warnings that are showing up. We got some unused drawing models, we got an unused drawing sheet, and we get some drawing detailed setup. If I'm new to this, perhaps I don't know what are the intentions of this, why are these being checked? If I click on them, it is going to open up the help section in and display this specific. It kind of explains to you what this check is doing. And they've also added a new part that is called ModelCheck Teacher. And if you click on that link, it is going to more from a design perspective explain why this is an issue or why you should correct it, basically. So it's quite easy to get the information, to understand why these checks are in there, or why I should bother about them, basically. And another nice feature is that you could create your own help pages like this. So if you create an HTML page, you can link them to your checks. So you can set up a specific help section for your company that perhaps explains why this is important to your organization, that we check these parts, or why they should correct them, basically. If I expand one of these, perhaps the unused drawing models. So unused drawing models is, I've included a ski, but perhaps I also imported another model to the drawing. I was going to use it for a spare view or something, but I never put a view on the drawing, basically. So it still has a reference to this drawing since I've added it in, but it's not used anywhere in the drawing for any information, basically. So this is a good practice to remove these, basically. And it does not only report which they are, but you also have a possibility to do that directly from this section. So you can select one or many, or you can choose delete, and it will actually remove the unused drawing model from this drawing. And at any time, could I then rerun this to see that that check now has been removed, and I've fixed or correct that issue that we have. The same thing, similar here with the unused sheet, pretty simple example, but I got a secondary sheet, nothing is displayed on it, it's kind of not saying anything. So in those cases, I could just click delete. Oh, I need to select that one as well. and delete it. And the same thing here, if I just rerun the check, you can see how it disappears, but also the sheet here updated the drawing. So you can work pretty nicely directly from ModelCheck. You don't have to leave this interface, go into the model, do the changes, then regenerate. You can have this up and running, and you can always rerun it after you've made those changes. If we look at the last one here, it was about that DTL file. So perhaps the DTL file, as I mentioned earlier, it would set the standards of your drawing, basically. What should they look like? Both when in terms of design, fonts and views and such. So if you have one of these files, which is your general file, and you create a drawing based of it, all of those settings will be read into the actual drawing in itself. So as time goes by, those settings are within that drawing. It's not looking at the DTL file anymore. So if you were to make changes to that general DTL file, it would not reflect on any older drawings, basically. But in this, if we simulate this case here, that we have updated our ISO DTL file with some changes, and I opened up this old drawing, it would reflect on that we have an inconsistency between the company standards and what this drawing looks like. I can easily just reapply those standards to it. So I can open up the file and it would bring in that information into it. So those are ways that you could work with ModelCheck directly and working with your model and updating them as you see these errors. And if we go into the assembly, we can also look at what it looks like in here. So we do the same thing. You could go to File, Prepare. You can also add it, as I've done here, as a little shortcut, so it makes it faster to bring this up. And in this case, we want to run this on all levels of this assembly, basically. So I'll bring in all levels. And we will have no errors on the assembly level, basically. So there's no errors really at this level at all. But if we look at the assembly models, it's going to go through each child of this and also verify them for errors. And here we can actually find one error at this level. So if I go in there, I can see that we find weak dimensions within a sketch in this model. So if I expand this, I also see that what dimension this is. And if I click on it, I don't know if you can see it really, but it's going to highlight in the model where that sketch is present. So at this point, I can see that it is this component. I can go in and select that, perhaps activated it. And if I select the actual component in itself, I can see it is that extrude where we have the issue, and I'll go into that section. And a weak dimension, it would be colored in blue, so I can quickly identify that we have this weak dimension present here. Let's see if I can zoom it in a little bit. And let's see if I get rid of that. Let's see. So I can select it and choose to set it as strong value to correct that one. So at this point, I could reactivate or save my change, and I could also set activation on the higher level. And if I want, I can rerun this just to see if we currently have issues here, but we fix those as well. So this way you can, at a point in time when you're finished, the user in this case perhaps is finished with both the design and the drawing in this case, he wants to check them into the model, to Windchill, and at that point he could or she could verify if they fill out these checks that we have set up before we send files into the system. And some of these could be set up with the save mode or regeneration mode. Others could be with this interactive at a certain point in time that I choose to set it up. So with that, I am going to go back to my slides just for a minute. On a final note here on ModelCheck, there at this point, let's say we're ready and have completed our design changes, and we want to bring this into Windchill. So there is a built-in process in Windchill that can prevent check-in of Creo parametric models until they meet this preferred criteria. And this is called a Windchill gatekeeper. It can be configured to verify the amount of errors and when ModelCheck was last run, for instance. So you can go into your preference of your site and you can enable this, basically. So an example could be that we should have no errors within the last 24 hours. So we need to perform a check during the last 24 hours, and it should show no errors, and then we are able to check this in. This is, of course, to prevent check-in of poor quality models to Windchill. But I really want to add a but here. Our experience is that this could cause users to actually not check in content to Windchill at all. Instead, they're saving it in their workspaces as long as possible before they actually perform that check-in. And we don't want that, right? We want users to check in their data. That brings traceability to the organization and a backup on the server side, just to mention two things. So all information and design intent can, of course, not be in place at day one. And that's what the design process looks like. So instead of focusing on creating a gate at the check-in, let's do that when we release content instead. So if we utilize state and lifecycle correctly in Windchill, it is very clear what we are working on and what is released, basically. Because the most important time for all of this information to be in place and to be accurate is when we release the content, when we're ready to produce on it or source or send it to downstream systems like ERP or MES. So instead of having the gatekeeper working for us to control this as check-in, I would like to show you a second software, actually our own PDSVISION QA, and how ModelCheck and QA could work together to uphold your company standards. QA, just as with ModelCheck, it's integrated into, in this case, the Windchill UI instead. So it's going to become a part of what the users are used to and how they're used to working within the environment. It also streamlines into the traditional workflows of Windchill. It's also highly configurable. It's a set of different standard checks that you can configure to your needs and according to your company standards. As mentioned, it's enabled in several Windchill features. So if you're running, for instance, a promotion request, this can trigger and validate those objects that are being sent for promotion. It could be part of a change workflow, or it can be run ad hoc on the info pages of objects. The different check types vary among these 10 standard checks. So we have this attribute check. It could, of course, validate the parameters that come from Creo, but it could be any attributes within the Windchill environment. It could be for your documents, if you have Office documents within the system, or other types of CAD files from a third-party client or a simulation software or similar. It could be the WT parts attributes. Some of these also verify the structure of, for instance, a CAD structure or a WT part structure, that the lower levels are released before a parent gets released, for instance, is a typical use case of this. There are some specific checks like CAD configuration check, which verifies that drawing are updated accordingly to the CAD model, something that is quite hard to catch with ModelCheck. We have this publish check, which verifies that the object has the defined representations that you set up. We need step files or PDFs at certain points. Can verify that these are generated and in place. It could be more of a system-based checks as well, that we do not have checked out content as it goes into workflows or into a promotion, for instance. Have we really checked in all of the changes before we send it for promotion? At a final point, we have the link check, which verifies the linkage in between objects. It could be between a WT part and a CAD file. It could be WT part to different types of documents. It could be between CAD documents or such. So we can verify any attributes that are on these links or on the objects that are linked to these objects. On a final note, we have what we call the legacy check. It's just a possibility to use this framework to run very customer-specific checks, basically. These checks can then be combined into what we call a suite. So you can set up a few attribute checks. You have the structure check, perhaps that checked out check, and you combine them into what, in this case, call a release suite. And as soon as you run the promotion wizard, it is going to use this suite to verify those objects that you define. And you can set up one of these, or you can have several. So you could, perhaps if you have another target state than release, you have a prototype phase. You have less checks when you go to prototype. You can have another suite that is specifically if you go to the target state of prototype, for instance. So you can really combine checks and these suites to target specific objects and where they are transitioning within their life cycles. At the end, this can be, as I mentioned earlier, included in different areas of Windchill. So in this case, it's included within the promotion request. So there's a fourth step to this. We will see the checks that run through it, and we can go back and correct these issues, for instance. In the same sense, this could be run within the change process, for instance, here in a change task. And as you can see on the icons here, we have two indications of warnings. There is a yellow one, a call of warning, and also the error message. The warning message would only give you a heads up about this, but you could still proceed within that action that you were about to do. If I go back here to your promotion request, all of these are warnings, so you could actually finish this promotion request and file it. But if we have errors within this, and it's entirely up to you which one you set to warning or error, you would actually be prevented to go any further. So you would get a message that you cannot file this promotion request or this finalize this change task before you performed or resolve these errors that you have. So I see that time is a little bit short, but I just wanted to show you real quick what this looks like also in the Windchill environment, and perhaps how we can work with this model as we check this into the Windchill environment, and how we QA could take over from ModelCheck as we go into the Windchill environment. So if we go to recently accessed, I've probably been working with this assembly in itself, or actually we can move to the drawing first. If I'm on the information page of the drawing, I will have an info tab on the info page, which is called QA. If I click on this play button, I am going to see a list of available, let's see, I have some issues with the Zoom here, some available checks that has been defined for this. So I can choose to run any specific ones of these, or I can run the full suite here, checking all of these files, all of these checks. So if in this case, we set up a ModelCheck validation check, and if I click on OK, it is giving me an error on that level. So we have potential modeling errors reported by ModelCheck. Please rerun ModelCheck and correct any errors. So if we go to the details page, as I mentioned earlier, information from ModelCheck can be sent as parameters into the models, which can then be brought into Windchill. So here we can see when this, I never saved the drawing before, so this was run on last Friday, where it had an error. So that's what it's reacting to here. I could choose to set this up as we've done here it should have no errors at this point as we go into releasing this product, basically. So this is a way that you can bring that information from ModelCheck into Windchill. You don't have to show them like this, but they can be saved with those models. And QA can take over and validate those checks as you go into a release process. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. This is more of to give you an idea of how to run this from the tabs. So if I go to our assembly as well, and I choose to also here, let's see. Actually, I'm going to not take the assembly. I will bring you to the part structure of this instead. Let's skip a few ahead a little bit so we have time to finalize this. So just as I said, this could be checking the actual CAD files, but it could very well check article structures or other types of documents. So this CAD file is linked to a WT part, and this in itself has a full structure that mimics the assembly in this case. But apart from the CAD, perhaps we're adding in different types of documents to this. There are other types of attributes that are linked on these articles that we also want to verify. And this could also be done with the QA. So if I go here to QA for that specific part instead, and I really have trouble with this Zoom, but I hope you're going to see that at least. If we instead run the full suite here, we are going to check all of these checks at the same time. So in this case, we get a few errors, and it tells me that there are no released instruction for this assembly. So we can validate, in this case, we have set up some sort of documentation that we need linked and released content on this level. So we need that instruction to be linked in, and it also needs to be in a state of released. We are working with classification, so we apparently have not classified this part as it's being released, so that attribute is not filled out at this point. So I would have to go in and correct that. And there is also one of the children within the structure is still in the design phase, so that needs to be released actually before we can release on this level. So if I go into structure, we can see that a lower level here is still in a design phase. We would need to release that before we can go to a higher level and release on that level. And what this would look like, perhaps users could use this to work ad hoc, but for them, if they wanted to release this, they would probably go into a promotion request or a change process. And what that looks like, you're probably familiar with this one, but the initial 3 steps are, and we could skip these really quick, are then complemented by this 3rd or 4th step that is actually running the QA check at this point in time. So I will get this information here, and since there is an error in this, I will not only be warned, but I will also, if I try to finish this, I would not be able to do so before I've at least addressed this issue. So this is a way that you can set this up not only to guide the users within how you want them to work with and also following your standard settings that you have defined for it. So I see that we're actually running out of time, but I would think that for the user or the customers that use this, it has brought a lot of value and improved on their quality. And I would say my conclusion from having projects and setting this up at a few customers is to start small and build upon that. It's easy to build a lot of rule sets and checks that you want to validate, but start with something small that is really crucial and build upon that. And ModelCheck is free to use. It's available with Creo, or free. It's available with Creo Parametric, and the QA is an additional product that we supply for Windchill. So your call to action, if you're interested in any of these, I hope that you at least got an idea what they can do. There was a really quick webinar, is to either reach out to me or Roger if you want any further information about this or discussions on it. And I would also advise you to explore our other webinars that are available on our homepage if there's something you're interested in. Thank you very much for taking your time this morning, and if you have any questions, please reach out.
Thank you very much, Neil. And actually, I think you answered the question that we have here, whom to contact if you want to try out the PDSVISION app. And that is actually contacting Niels himself or me.
Yeah, that would be one of us.
Yeah, so perfect. And by that, we close this webinar and wish you all a very good day. And thanks for attending, and see you soon in a screen close to you.
Thank you.